So it's good to be back. I also am a co-founder of Rescue SF. And I've been so derelict in my activities there because of Neighborhoods United SF. So thank you, Carolyn, for carrying the torch and in that space because it's also so important to our city. Yes, I am here today as a co-founder of Neighborhoods United SF. We formed in response to what we all know is going on here. I'm assuming most of you probably have a good idea, but so some of this may be repetitive and it gets a little dense, some of these presentations, parts of the presentation, but I do really think it's important that we are all on the same page, or to whatever degree you want to be on the same page. So I'm going to throw up the slides here. So about NUSF, so we're about 50, 60 or so neighborhood associations. We came together to create a united voice, very similar to what we did with Rescue SF, to take neighborhood voices, pull them together so that the city can't ignore us, that we're actually a much larger and effective voice that way. We're also not just neighborhood associations. We are working on this effort with the tenant groups that are impacted by these upzoning plans, and also the small businesses and merchant corridors. And this is one of those alliances that you don't see every day. You know, we all have our primary issues we care about, but this is something all three different entities that I think in large part comprise the majority of residents, or represent the majority of residents in the city. Just more specifically, the San Francisco Tenants Union, the Race and Equality and All Planning Coalition, and Small Business Forward, and of course you guys tonight. Which the nice thing about you guys always, your group having been involved with us, you do bring a lot of groups besides just yourself, and that's really helpful. Just want to start by giving some definitions, and bear with me as I read through these and through a lot of the slides, because I do think it's important for you guys to know what's happening. Yes, in my backyard, I always make the assumption everyone knows what a YIMBY is, but here's one definition. Is a pro-deregulation lobbyist group promoting high-density market-rate housing as a fix for the so-called housing crisis, often backed by developer and tech funding. Critics argue it masks investor-driven goals as grassroots activism, and it fuels gentrification. It's a little bit of a slanted view, of course, from our perspective, but that's how we feel our interactions with them have been. NIMBY, those of us here on the screen, there's one definition that could be applicable, as a term often misused to discredit community voices opposing luxury upzoning and deregulation, reducing legitimate concerns about displacement and overdevelopment to a caricature of selfishness. And as you know, this YIMBY versus NIMBY narrative is being used to distract from the real conversations that need to be happening. Another term that you'll hear is density decontrol, and that is the removal of limits on how many housing units can be built on a property, allowing developers to build far more than previously permitted. And that would be within the existing height and bulk allowable, whatever that may be today or what it may be in the future. Another term is state density bonus, and that is a California law that lets developers build more units and taller buildings than the local zoning allows if they include a small percentage of affordable housing. Okay, so first slide is upzoning isn't a housing solution, it's a real estate strategy. So we often hear that we need to build housing, right? You hear almost every politician saying, we need housing. That is the mantra they all will say to you. Well, we have built housing. Mission Bay, Soma, Market and Van Ness, and Hayes Valley are proof. Thousands and thousands of new units have gone up, mostly in former industrial or underused areas. And I think what I want to point out here is that you'll hear the planning department say the western and the northern sides of the city, which is where most of the upzoning is happening, haven't taken their fair share. You've only done 10% of all the housing that's been developed over the been put out in the last 10 years. But that's a statement that doesn't reveal the reality, which is the northern and the western parts of the city have been building housing for the last 125 years. Can't get a butter knife through most of these properties. It is an extremely dense part of the city. And then to say, oh, we've only taken a small share, so it's time you take it in the teeth, is not even relevant. It's not even applicable. Not even really take into consideration the density that already exists in the northern and the western parts of the city. And the other parts of the city, the eastern and the southern parts, were able to take on that housing because they had a lot more light industrial or more land to do so. More supply does not mean affordable supply. So San Francisco, as I just said, has added thousands of units, but prices keep rising. So this philosophy of if you just, keep supplying, the prices will go down is not proving out. Why? Because what's being built is not being built for the working families. They're usually, $1 million investor-owned condos. And when you have a condo complex that has exorbitant HOA fees, so none of what is being promoted to be built or being inspired or incentivized is affordable housing. And also the housing market, and this is something nobody wants to talk about, or they don't talk about because the subject is so wonky. It doesn't respond to normal free market behavior. And when somebody says, I want to live in San Francisco, I'm 35 and I'm really frustrated that I can't afford to live here. And I think if we just build a ton more housing, that eventually there'll be a unit somewhere that I can afford. And they think, oh, maybe if you build all these towers, a bunch of us older folks will leave our current housing and we'll move into the tower. And then somebody, will filter into our home. And somehow there's going to be this filtering trickle down effect, but that hasn't proven out for generations in San Francisco. And I don't think it's going to turn the tide anytime soon. So the housing market isn't about dwellings, building dwellings for people to live in. The housing market for all of us and for what is being proposed is investments. Our homes are investments. It's not about a dwelling. And when it's about an investment, that is the metrics for which decisions are made onto what will be built and where it will be built and how much it'll be sold for. And the folks that are complaining that they can't afford to live here, it's because they're not competing with you and me. They're competing with international capital. They're competing with an entirely different world. And that reality is not being discussed. And it's being assumed that the folks, all of us here on the screen, or those that already live here, are somehow stopping folks from being able to afford homes here. So the upzoning, to go ahead now and focus this upzoning on stable, built-out neighborhoods won't fix the problem. And as you may know, that the target is existing built-out neighborhoods. It's not open land or underdeveloped. All this does is when you go into a stable built-out neighborhood, it displaces existing residents and businesses. It stresses the infrastructure and it benefits speculators. The neighborhoods now being targeted are the western part of the city and the northern side of the city. And of course, they are already the most densely built in the city and, and as important, in the country. We are the second most dense city in the country. And these neighborhoods are some of the most dense within that city. So as I said, it's not as if San Francisco hasn't done its part in building housing. They are forcing high-rise development onto the walkable, already dense neighborhoods to hit an arbitrary state, quote, capacity numbers. That isn't planning, it's surrender to pressure. So I think, we all think maybe, that we should be focusing our growth in areas with actual redevelopment potential, not destabilizing our vibrant, functioning communities. Vancouver and Brooklyn are a couple examples. They upzoned and they became more expensive. And to my point earlier, it's about investment properties. It's not about homes. It's not about dwellings to live in. It's about investment. So another screen of information I think it's important is Sacramento's power grab. There's permanent changes and there's no accountability. So you've all probably heard plenty about the state's overreach. It's punitive, it's outdated, and it's unfunded mandates. So San Francisco is being forced to absorb an unrealistic housing target of 82,000 units based on pre-pandemic and outdated population growth projections. And there's no funding or infrastructure or affordable housing to meet that goal. And of the 82,000, 57% needs to be affordable. So that's 46,000 units need to be affordable. And just for another number crunch, to build 46,000 units of affordable housing in San Francisco's market would cost $19 billion. So that alone makes the mandate ridiculous, if yet alone unachievable. But yet it has been forced upon our city with punishments should we not meet it. What do our local leaders do? Capitulate. You ask most, not every one of them. I will not throw them all under the bus, but those that deserve it, I will. But our local leaders will say, our hands are tied. It's law. We must meet this number. We must show movement towards meeting this number. And if we don't, we get the builder's remedy. That's the answer we get as their constituents is sorry, game over. We need to do whatever the state tells us. I prefer a leader that actually stands up and says these numbers are baloney and get the public behind them. But that is not what we have right now. Right now, we have the state telling our city and all the cities across California what the numbers are they need to meet and how they need to meet it. So the upzoning map that we'll be showing in a second is based on what the state thinks is okay. And I think actually what our local leadership has done has gone way, way beyond even what the state wants. So that's something I will go into more detail in a moment. Blanket upzoning is excessive. So right now the city is planning for approximately 800,000 units of capacity to meet a mandate of 36,000 units. And just not to make all of your eyes roll in the back of your head, but the 36,000 is the net amount of housing we need to do when you take the 82,000 that we were mandated. The state says throw 15% wiggle room on that, 94,000, and then subtract the amount of pipeline they have allowed us to recognize, which is around 58,000. So that means 36,000 units, 36,000. You have to upzone our city by 800,000 units, which is almost equal to our current population. Our current number of physical dwelling units in San Francisco is 414,000. So that would be doubling what our current physical build out is. So obviously this number is never going to happen. 800,000 is never going to be built. Everyone knows that. But the point of it is they believe they have to go excessive because the likelihood of what will get built is so small. So you create capacity, throw open the doors, hope something gets built somewhere, somehow, someday. That is not planning. That's wishful thinking. And the narrative has shifted because 2 years ago, when the 82,000 unit was foisted upon San Francisco, Senator Weiner, who was the architect behind most of this, admitted, yeah, 82,000 is a lot, but it's kind of the city's punishment for having been, not built enough over the last several decades. So we're throwing that in, and we're throwing in people who feel housing insecure, throwing in homelessness. They threw everything in. So the number 82,000 really wasn't relative to any metrics that were happening in our city that would be realistic. But now, couple years into this, they're changing the tune. Now we're turning this into a 50-year plan. Mayor Lurie presented at the Cow Hollow Association annual meeting last week, and he said, well, it's not an 8-year plan, it's a 50-year plan. 50-year plan. So he presented it on April 4th. It has to be done by the end of the year. So we're going to put forth a 50-year plan, and we have 9 months rush to do it in. Whereas Mission Bay, Soma, Market and Van Ness, Hayes Valley, those plans all took years to properly put together with neighborhood input. Also, think about this. If we now have a 50-year horizon, then why can't we accept everything that's in the pipeline rather than what they thought was actually doable in the next 8 years? So that could work to our advantage. And this is a very important fact we should all be aware of, and that this is an irreversible decision. Once we upzone, the state law, albeit through Senator Weiner, now makes it illegal to downzone. So even if we find that the upzoning is being abused or is causing harm or there's public outcry, it is illegal to downzone. So that's a huge problem. Impacts of upzoning. So this is the new plan that is out there. If you go to our website, nusf.net, it's on the homepage of that, and you can click on this interactive map. Some of the big changes from Mayor Breed's map to Daniel Lurie's map is all of this light blue you'll see here. These corridors, these colored corridors, they're a variety of 6 stories or 8 stories. There's 12 stories. There's as far as 30 stories. 40. It's all over the place throughout all of the western and northern part of the city. The light blue is what they call the density decontrol, where you can put as many units as possible within the buildable allowance. One thing the map does not talk about is that every single one of these blue lots, if they're on a corner, gets to go up to 6 stories. So you'll look at this map and you'll go, oh, this isn't so bad. Look at this. This means everything's still 40 feet. Oh, cool. You know, my 4-story neighborhood should be fine. Well, what's not obvious is that all the corner units in the blue area get to go to 6 stories. And the second thing is if a lot is 8,000 square feet or more, it gets to go to 6 stories. So what that encourages is lot accumulation. You start seeing people get 2 lots side by side that are now large, and now you can build up to 6 stories. Another thing the senator was busy working on was SB 423. And so all of this is all what they call the high resourced areas, some very high and some just regular high. And these are the areas the state has targeted because these supposedly have good schools, good, parks. It also overlays with the areas that developers have wanted to build in for a long time. All these areas do not get notified when new development is happening in their area. Whereas all of the eastern and the southern part of the city still do get notified. They're considered priority equity areas, and the blues are considered well-resourced areas. So these are just very, loosely designed illustrations. I mean, obviously, to build individual houses would look quite different, but to give you a sense of what 8 stories and 6 stories would be like on a typical Richmond or Sunset corridor. And they literally have 14 stories slated throughout these areas, which is huge. They just recently put St. Anne's Little Sisters of the Poor is up for sale, and immediately that lot got changed to now 8 stories versus what it currently is now, which should be closer to 4. This picture here, I pulled this in just to illustrate that this took years of negotiation to get a 7-story built on Geary and Masonic next to the Trader Joe's. Right now it's a Lucky Penny. Well, now the site is sat quiet because they're waiting for the new upzoning, which puts them up to 24 stories. So you start to see what happens in the city is it becomes very speculative in what people will actually build for a community when they know that they can get so much more if they wait for the upzoning to occur. Another really important point is how this impacts the neighborhood merchants, which I believe for me and maybe for a lot of you, living in a dense city can be tough. But what makes it so livable is our walkable commercial corridors where we know the merchants, they know us. It's what creates the vibrancy of our communities. Yet the upzoning specifically targets commercial corridors. That is the place where they're trying to build the most. And that's the place where upzoning would cause the most damage. And just a important point, you must demolish before upzoning. You have to take down a building before putting a new one up. And the disruption that comes along with the demolition affects more than just that one lot. Small businesses, they risk displacement from demolition. We currently have about 400 legacy businesses that make us special, like Joe's Ice Cream and many of the ones in your neighborhoods. They're at risk. The small scale landlords are disappearing. And what you're finding, it's more corporate landlords are coming in and they don't have the relationships or care about the relationships that might have been there in the past. When you have these buildings rebuilt, there's usually, there's no commercial rent control. So they don't have any recourse for losing their space, whereas tenants supposedly do, but many times tenants are quietly paid off. So the building is empty and then they change over. So I think it's really, really important that we keep tabs on what happens to the neighborhood commercial corridors through this upzoning process. So what is the real impact of the upzoning? Demolition and displacement of existing affordable homes and small businesses, loss of neighborhood character, the green belts. As those bigger lots start coming in, they do cut further and further into the green belts. And then, of course, the public vistas. There's increased pressure on our infrastructure and public safety, and then no funding or guarantees of affordable housing. Better solutions for Mayor Lurie to pursue. prioritize the approved pipeline. So what we'd like to see him do is go back to the state and say, hey, you've given us a 50-year, we have a 50-year map here. We think all of this stuff can be done in 50 years. So we'd like to recognize 69,000 units rather than the 55. Prioritize building affordable housing versus market rate. Right now, what they're doing is they're reducing the amount of affordable units that need to be, like, for instance, the Union House. I'm sure you'll find in certain neighborhoods that the ground floor retail in some of this brand new luxury condos is empty. We see this again and again. They have, for lease signs on the ground floor because, like we were saying earlier, what gets replaced is too expensive for the smaller mom and pop businesses to afford to move into. Revitalize downtown. That is something I know that they're working on. I know it is a heavy lift that will not happen easily, but that is something that I think most everyone in the city can get behind versus going out to these commercial neighborhood corridors that could be really disrupted by upzoning. Revitalize empty, abandoned, and underutilized housing. Focus on that, which is all over the city. Have a program to help people take care of those types of properties in their community, and discourage renovictions and the defined demolition. So the renovictions are when you say you're going to renovate, but you really evict. That happens all over the city. And then the demolitions, as you see in these pictures, really end up being just a complete tear down and redo because the definitions are kind of loose. What else are we asking for? We are calling on our elected leaders, starting with Mayor Lurie, to stop playing along with Sacramento's false housing narrative and to stand up for San Francisco. Specifically, push back on the state's manufactured mandates and challenge these targets that are outdated and inflated, and they're disconnected from our city's economic and demographic realities. Additionally, as I was saying earlier, how we want them to recognize more of the pipeline. We also want them to recognize other upzoning that has already happened in the city, such as these 4 and 6-plex capacities. They're not recognizing any of that. So we would like to see our mayor ask for more of that, because the more that the state will recognize is the less aggressive the upzoning map needs to be. Create real family housing, as Mayor Lurie has claimed that this map now is family housing map. But it's really not, because that requires much larger, spaces, and a lot of what's going to be built will be much smaller. But we think that if they kind of end the density decontrol, which allows the unlimited units, that's something that should be considered. Delay the January 26th deadline. So right now, our city has a deadline of January to produce a map that the Board of Supervisors will approve, and the mayor will sign, and then then we're committed. This will be our new zoning laws going forward. We think that with all the changes that have happened, he should go back to the state and ask for a delay on this deadline. Ideally, of course, we prefer that they scrap the current upzoning plan because it is completely unnecessary and excessive, and it makes land more expensive. It accelerates speculation, and it fuels displacement, and it causes demolition. So there isn't a lot that we see good coming from this upzoning map other than it being foisted upon us, because it will not deliver the affordability that we all are hoping for. The map, the timeline of what's going on over the last several months, the map was introduced. There's been tenant displacement hearings that are still ongoing, plans to try to protect tenants more than they have been. We did have one success, the upzoning notification legislation that was sponsored by Connie Chan passed, and that basically now the city did not want to do this, but now they have to notify everyone whose property is being upzoned and everyone within 300 feet of someone being a property being upzoned. So that nets to 400,000 people are going to be notified. So think about that. This map is impacting 400,000 residents and businesses. This is no minor change to San Francisco. That is, of course, why they didn't want to do it, because it kind of exposes how dramatic this is. And in fact, the upzoning covers over 13,000 acres. And they're telling us that, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Most of it won't happen. What's coming up right now in this May, June, July is the outreach for Lurie's upzoning plan. So the San Francisco Planning is going out, trying to talk to neighborhood groups. They've been doing so for a while. I don't know if it's changing a lot of hearts and minds, but they are going out there trying to explain what they're doing. In the fall, so August, they kind of all disappear. And then in the fall, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's when all the supervisors are, hopefully each of your supervisors will have listened to you if there's changes you want to the map. If they aren't listening, then gotta scream louder. But that's when they will be voting on it. And there's a high likelihood they will rubber stamp whatever is whatever the planning department puts forth by fall, excuse me. Most of them are going to rubber stamp. So you hope that you can work with your supervisor now to get any changes into place. And then Mayor Lurie signs it in January. So please get informed and get engaged if you're not already. And the quick way to our website is nusf.net. Tell your neighbors and members of your associations. Send emails to City Hall. Please attend the community meetings and city hearings. Planning Association for the Richmond is having theirs in District 1 tomorrow night. I am more than happy to come speak at any of your groups or do a town hall. I'll be happy to come speak on that. And of course, when the city hearings happen, when we get to the fall, we really, really need all of your engagement. We need your voices, we need your emails, we need your letters, and we need you showing up and speaking at the hearings. Let me put it this way. There's policies that Mayor Lurie, you may 100% agree with when it comes to dealing with homelessness or dealing with safety or dealing with crime and other things in our city. You may full on agree with him. And those policies come and go with each administration, and they come and go with economic conditions. But zoning is different. This is permanent. This will be here for the next 50, 60 years. This is not something that we can fuss with and cross our fingers and hope for the best. This is something we all need to be engaged with today. And we really, really, really need everybody to know about it. Because once you tell somebody, they go, "What? You're kidding me." I'm like, no, this is really happening. So that I'm really making a plea for all of you to let your memberships know. Find out where your supervisors stand. They should be working for you and with you. And let's build the right housing in the right places for the people who actually live and work here. And the final slide is, you can only ruin a city once. And let's not it be on our watch. That's it.